Let's get more on the outlook for AI now with our next guest. Joining us from Tokyo is Crawford del Prete, President at Tech Industry Specialist IDC. And Crawford, thanks so much for joining us. And you're in Japan, of course, at this point in time, so we can get to what you're seeing there in just a moment. But I wanted to start off more big picture at this point, because we're really just seeing that global chip battle intensifying, and you've got billions of dollars that are being poured in from the US, Japan, even Korea is putting funding into it. They traditionally haven't done that. China, of course. Where do you see the leader really emerging in that competition for AI supremacy between the US, Western powers, and also what's happening in China?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for having me. So when you look at the overall AI semiconductor marketplace, and what's interesting right now is the way to play AI it has been semiconductors. And the reason for that is that we are seeing an infrastructure upgrade right now associated with the core infrastructure we have in the cloud and how we need to process next generation workloads associated with AI. And those workloads right now are being dominated by US companies, which is primarily around NVIDIA. And what's so interesting is people think about it just as a GPU play with NVIDIA as a company that, maybe a passing fad. The reality is that NVIDIA has developed a very, very significant moat, not only around the GPU, but around the software platform that you need to write applications for that GPU architecture, which is called CUDA. And so we believe that that is going to be a substantial moat for the company going forward, almost likened to what we saw in the client-server era with Wintel, where you had a software platform and a semiconductor platform that created an environment for innovation. And in a way, we're seeing that same setup with NVIDIA and their GPU and their CUDA software application, their CUDA platform. So I think that on the from an overall standpoint, right now, the Western architectures, primarily driven by NVIDIA, definitely have the advantage. And I think you're going to see that play out and continue to play out for a fairly substantial period of time.
And I want to keep talking about NVIDIA, because NVIDIA is one of the key earnings that we're going to be tracking next week, due the 22nd. But we've had so much investor enthusiasm around this stock and such sky-high expectations that we've seen across big tech reporting this season. Do you think that they can continue to have that market advantage or market edge?
Yeah, so look, the law of large numbers is going to mean that the absolute growth rate of the company is going to start to abate. But you're talking about a company that's going to grow, roughly around 80% year over year. And so I think you're going to see that there will be other companies. You're going to see AMD with very, very credible offerings in the marketplace. You're seeing Intel coming out with very credible offerings in the marketplace. And you're also going to see that is going to drive pricing, and it's also going to drive more competition in the marketplace. But as I mentioned, AMD and NVIDIA and Intel are going to be using an open source software platform around their GPU architecture. NVIDIA is using their own CUDA architecture. And I think that that's going to still give NVIDIA an advantage on the infrastructure side, probably going into next year. So it really comes down to investor expectations and that expectation for growth. But make no mistake, the moat that NVIDIA has developed is a very defensible moat over time. The other thing I would add is that we're going to see the edge of the network start to become enabled by AI. So we're going to see PCs, we're going to see phones. As a matter of fact, by 2026, we believe about 60% of PCs will have an AI processor on them. That is a part of the market where Intel and AMD will participate significantly and will be able to become more of a part of the AI investment that we're seeing in the overall market.
Crawford, we did want to get your views on China, the competition, how close potentially it's getting to be able to make significant difference in closing the gap in R&D, but also your assessment of how effective and I suppose the longevity of the chip hoarding that Beijing has done as well.
Yeah. So when you look at China, how effective the chip hoarding that's going to be a near-term opportunity. What's got to happen long-term is China has to develop an ecosystem. China has to develop an independent ecosystem for AI development, and that's going to be driven by by semiconductor companies, primarily companies like Huawei, and HiSilicon, as well as their startup infrastructure, which is going to allow a lot of custom silicon to be developed by a lot of the hyperscaler cloud providers that are out there. I think what you're going to see in China is you're going to see more of a lumpy road. You're going to see situations where they've got to be able to develop leading edge technology for their own uses internally. And I would say that we'll probably see some of the hoarding that happened run out, and then you'll see cycles develop in China where we're sort of transitioning to their own inside of China developed architectures, which again may mean for a lumpy environment going forward.
Crawford, how much more difficult do you expect the environment to get? Of course, we're going into November. There's geopolitical posturing at play here as well. Or do you think the bifurcation, the competition and the strategic competition in this is already pretty well set?
I think you're going to see that the competition is fairly well set. I think you're going to see, from a China standpoint, it's really going to turn into how quickly they can internally within China innovate, and I wouldn't underestimate. I just think you're going to see a bit of a choppy environment, but I don't think you're going to see things get a lot worse in terms of where we are today and how China's able to either access the technology they're able to access today or be able to develop their own technology going forward. But as I indicated, that's going to take some time, and I think that's going to contribute to some of the lumpiness that I'm describing.
Crawford, we've seen Japan really making big efforts to attract international chip makers to its market. They also have very ambitious chip plans. You're in Tokyo right now. What are the sorts of conversations you're having, the tone, and are you seeing real progress on that front?
Yeah, we are seeing progress. I mean, when you look at the investment that you're seeing in Japan around semiconductors, Rapidus is investing heavily to be a leading supplier here in Japan. And they're not only looking to build a foundry capability, they are looking to build an ecosystem up in the northern part of the country. And I think that as well, TSMC making an investment in Japan is going to drive a significant amount of innovation and creation of a new ecosystem. I think you really have to think about, people think about sort of the old way Japan thought about the semiconductor industry, which was more of a captive industry where Fujitsu made chips for their own uses, NEC made chips for their own uses. Now we're moving into a new era where you've got companies like, for example, Toyota, or Honda that are going to be making edge devices in the form of driverless vehicles. They have a motivation to be able to work with a local supplier here to have a significant access to technology. And I think that what you're going to see over the next decade and even sooner is the investment that is happening in Japan around semiconductors will mean that we'll see a new engineering ecosystem start to develop. That's going to include AI, but it's also going to include leading edge foundry capacity that will represent incremental ability to have semiconductors available all across the world from Japan. And so I think it's really a rebalancing, if you will, of where we can expect to see not only semiconductors made, but where the engineering around semiconductors happens. And I think you're going to see that shift in Japan. I'm definitely seeing the signs of it now.
Crawford, this is kind of I guess, a big picture, maybe a bit of a moonshot question, but what is next when it comes to AI? There's been a lot of excitement over, the intersection of quantum when we finally get there, particularly here in Australia, huge amounts of government and private investment. Is that something that you're watching? And can you give us an indication of, what that would look like?
Yeah, so before we get to quantum, let's spend a little bit of time in terms of what's going to happen with AI. So the stage was sort of set for AI a number of years ago with the emergence of the cloud and the emergence of mobility and the emergence of high-speed networking. So now we're seeing that AI is pervading what we call horizontal use cases, and that's what you're seeing with things like Google Gemini and things that you're seeing with things like Copilot from Microsoft and obviously ChatGPT. The next phase will be AI starting to pervade what we call industry use cases. So AI will become embedded into software applications that are used in functions within the enterprise, like sales or like client services or like HR. Then you'll see AI moving into vertical applications where we see it used in healthcare, or we'll see it being used in manufacturing, or we'll see it being used in financial services. So we'll see sort of wide AI being, pervasively being used in all these different kinds of applications. Quantum will come even beyond sort of, we now have AI assisting in jobs in all these different vertical use cases, and that'll happen over the next couple of years. Quantum we won't see widely used for many years, where we'll start to see quantum processing very, very complicated workloads, workloads that are around things like simulation, workloads that are around areas like advanced security, and I think that for quite some time, we're not going to be, quantum's not going to be something that individuals or even large-scale enterprises are touching to a large degree. The big change that we'll see in AI is that today, over half of the investment in AI is happening at the semiconductor level. By 2027, it'll happen at about a third will happen at services, a third will happen in software, and a third will happen in infrastructure, including semiconductors. And that's going to be the big shift. More parts of the ecosystem will be participating in the AI industry.
Crawford, really great insights. We appreciate your time with us, Crawford del Prete, who's a president at IDC.